Have you ever listened to a trio, maybe a string trio with violin, viola, and cello, or a piano trio with piano, violin, and cello, where every part blends into harmony? That harmony doesn't just happen. The composer writes the notes, the conductor guides the performance, and the musicians bring it to life. Each has a role. If one tries to take over, the harmony collapses. Our government works the same way. The legislative branch composes the laws. The executive branch conducts, carrying them out. The judicial branch interprets, keeping the performance faithful to the Constitution. And here's where we come in. Without an audience, the music has no purpose. In a democracy, we the people are the audience. Our votes decide who writes, who conducts, and who interprets. For example, when Congress passes a law, the president can veto it. But Congress can override that veto. That's the conductor pushing back, but the composers holding firm to the notes they wrote. Checks and balances keep the music from turning into noise. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
From anyone, we stand American together.
When the founders wrote the Constitution, they were deeply concerned about power. They knew from history that too much power in one set of hands leads to tyranny. So they designed a government strong enough to function, but limited enough to prevent abuse. That's why each branch has its own role and the ability to check the others. Congress writes the score, the laws. The president conducts, carrying them out. The court interprets, keeping the performance faithful to the Constitution. It doesn't always sound smooth. Sometimes it feels more like rehearsal than polished performance. But that tension, that's exactly the point. And it makes sense when you think about who we are. We're a country of many people from many different backgrounds. That diversity is our strength, but it also means we'll never all want the same thing at the same time. Checks and balances are what makes sure more voices get heard instead of just one. Take a quick example from history. In 1974, during the Watergate investigation, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that President Nixon had to turn over secret tapes. The executive branch resisted, but the judicial branch stepped in. And Congress was ready to respond if he didn't. That's checks and balances in action. And it's not just history. We've seen it again recently when the administration issued an order to cut federal funding for public broadcasters like PBS and NPR. Here's the problem. Under the Constitution, it's Congress, not the president, that holds the power of the purse. Congress, as the composer, decides how money is allocated. The president, as conductor, carries out that score. By issuing an order to cancel funding, the executive branch wasn't conducting. It was trying to compose. And there's a reason the composer's role belongs to Congress. We, the people, have more direct contact with them. They represent us by district and by state, and there are hundreds of them, which means more voices and perspectives feeding into the score, the notes on the page. The president, on the other hand, is just one person, elected nationally, yes, but still by only part of the people at the time of election. That's why his job is to conduct the score, not to decide the exact notes. Keeping those roles separate protects the people's voice from being drowned out by a single hand. Here's the truth check. Frustration with the system is normal, but that slowness, that back and forth, it isn't a flaw. It's the safeguard. A certain amount of tension means our system is working. Truth check. So how does this actually play out? Let's look at a few moments where checks and balances did exactly what they were designed to do. Take veto power. In 2008, President George W. Bush vetoed a major farm bill. But Congress, the composers, believed the bill mattered, so they overrode his veto with a 2/3 vote. That's the system at work. The president conducted, but Congress held the pen on the notes. Or think about treaties. In 1919, President Wilson came back from Europe with the Treaty of Versailles, but the Senate refused to ratify it. One person can't decide America's commitments on the world stage. The composers elected by the people had the final word. And then there's the courts. In 1952, during the Korean War, President Truman tried to seize steel mills to stop a strike. The Supreme Court ruled against him, saying he had overstepped. Even in wartime, the conductor can't write new notes that aren't on the page. The musicians, the courts, made sure the performance stayed true to the composer's intent. We saw this again more recently during the COVID-19 pandemic. Presidents issued sweeping emergency orders, from mask mandates to eviction moratoriums. Courts stepped in, upholding some measures, but striking down others as going beyond what the law allowed. The musicians weren't improvising. They were holding the performance to the written notes, not adding new ones, but staying true to what the composers had already written. Each branch has a distinct part in the same piece of music. The composer writes the notes, the conductor directs the performance, and the musicians play them as written. The harmony only works when no one tries to do it all. Sometimes it feels messy, even frustrating, but that messy back and forth is actually harmony in disguise. Truth check. But here's the piece many people forget. A performance isn't just about the people on stage. The audience matters. In music, the composer writes for the audience, the conductor guides for them, and the musicians play for them. In a democracy, we are that audience. And in a sense, the patrons too, because we're the ones shaping and funding the performance with our votes. We choose the composers by voting for Congress. We choose the conductor by electing the president. And indirectly, we shape the musicians because presidents we elect nominate judges and senators we elect confirm them. That's why Congress holds the composer's pen. There are hundreds of members, each representing districts or states, which makes them closer to us than the president could ever be. When citizens speak in midterm elections, they often shift the balance of Congress. For example, in 2018, voters across the country elected a new majority in the House of Representatives. That change immediately reshaped which laws were written and which investigations moved forward. It was citizens retuning the music. If the performance drifts off key, it's our job to notice, to speak up, and to choose new representatives when the time comes. If we sit back and just watch, unpleasant music will continue to be written, conducted, and played. Hard to admit, right? Sometimes we'd rather just watch the show from our seats. But in a democracy, we are the most important part of the performance. Truth check. So why does this matter today? When checks and balances work, no one person and no one branch can run away with power. That protects us, the citizens. It means presidents can't make laws on their own. Congress can't enforce its will without oversight. Courts can't invent rules that ignore what's written. We've seen this system tested again and again. A recent example is the executive order attempting to end birthright citizenship. For more than a century, the 14th Amendment has been understood to mean that anyone born in the United States is a citizen. That's written into the score. When the president tried to change that with the stroke of a pen, the courts stepped in. They reminded the executive branch, you can conduct, but you can't compose. The notes on the page, the Constitution, belong to the people through their representatives. And that's why this matters so much right now. When any branch tries to stretch beyond its role, our voices as citizens are at risk of being drowned out. If the conductor can rewrite the music at will, or the musicians start playing whatever they like, then the notes written by our representatives, the closest link to us, are ignored. Checks and balances protect us, not just from leaders we don't like, but from the danger of any leader in any party claiming too much control. Truth check. It's tempting to cheer when our side has the power, when the conductor makes the performance sound just the way we like. But harmony doesn't come from one role taking over the others. Real harmony comes when the composer writes, the conductor directs, and the musicians play what's written, and when we, the audience, hold them all accountable. Checks and balances are the music of democracy. And here's the part we can't forget. We want that music to keep playing even when the conductor isn't the one we would have chosen. Power changes hands, and when it does, checks and balances are the guardrails that keep our voices protected, no matter who is holding the baton. When have you pointed out that the music was off key or even helped retune it with your vote or your voice? Maybe in a midterm election or at a town hall or even in your local community. Share your story in the comments. I'll be reading. This week, when you hear a government action in the news, ask yourself one simple question. Is this composing, conducting, or interpreting? Then notice whether another branch is stepping in as a check. The more we notice these patterns, the more we can appreciate the hidden harmony behind the noise. Truth check. This space isn't about censoring or forcing people to agree. It's about pausing, noticing what drives our reactions, and coming to the conversation with openness, self-awareness, and a willingness to really listen together. I welcome different views, but I expect respect. Disagree? Great. Explain why. See it differently? Share your angle. Here, we use our differences as strengths, not weapons. And if you'd like a little extra help shaping your reply, I've linked my 3 Ps in Action comment edition in the description. It's the same process I use myself to pause, pinpoint truth, and proceed with purposeful forethought. Don't worry about reading all this here. The full list of sources is in the description and on my site, american-together.com. I share them because checking sources matters just as much as checking headlines. Checks and balances may feel slow, even frustrating, but they're what keep our democracy in tune. And here's the truth. The performance isn't complete without us. So keep listening, keep noticing, and most importantly, keep adding your voice. That's how we retune the music together. If this resonated with you, hit the thumbs up, share it with a friend, and join the conversation in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because together we're not just watching, we're building something. Remember, pause, pinpoint truth, proceed with purposeful forethought. Join the conversation. See you next time.